Hello friends, and welcome back. This will be part two of my series on painting the 4 black featherweights. Where we left off, I had explained the process I follow, and I was getting ready to prime them. You can see I have all 4 of them here. They're masked and they've had the self-etching primer applied. You'll see I'm wearing gloves now because I don't want to get oils from my fingers on any of the primer or any of the other parts while I'm handling them from now till the end of the project. So it's a glove-on process from here on out. Now these are in really good shape. They're quite smooth. I'm going to do a limited amount of wet sanding, primarily on the areas that I really that command your attention. The surface of the bed is the most important, but also the top and the front edge here. I just want to make sure those are really nice and smooth. So I'm going to be doing a little bit of wet sanding there. And then we're going to be setting them up on the table. I like to arrange them radially like this so I can walk around when I'm applying finish. And so I'll be shooting video of that. What I'm going to be doing this morning is we're going to do a little bit of wet sanding, just in a few spots, wherever I can feel, like on this one I can feel there's a little bit of piece of dust that is in the finish there that I can detect with my finger. So that'll get wet sanded out. We're going to wipe these down with a Tack rag that I'm going to put some denatured alcohol on just to make sure there's no more oils on these. And then I'm going to be spraying the first 2 coats of black. The very first coat will be a very, very light coat. It's just enough to get, what we like to say is to get it sticky. And in fact, it won't even completely cover the primer. I'll come back in about 15 minutes and put on a heavier coat. And then we're going to let that dry overnight. And that's going to really end part 1. Part 2. And then we're going to come back after that, wet sand the black in preparation for the final coat of black, and spray on a kind of a medium coat of black to complete the process of getting the black on. And then they'll be ready for decals and a tiny bit of wet sanding, and then we'll be putting the clear coat on. So those parts are coming up, but today it's going to be a little bit of prep and getting the initial black on there. So stay tuned. All right, so this is the machine that I just showed you. Has a little bit of a spot of dust that is in the finish here. So I'm gonna wet the surface with a wet sponge. I've already taken, this is P400, fairly coarse in terms of, it's the coarsest wet paper I use, but I'm going to use it very lightly. I'm going to wrap it, and this is a used piece. When they get, after you've used them a bit, they don't cut as sharply, so it's better for, if you want to do a light job, use a used piece of the wet paper. So I've wrapped it around my rubber block, and I just go over this, and it doesn't take much, and I can feel that's already gone. And I'm just going to lightly go over the whole surface of the bed here, get a little more water on there, and that is really it. That's all I need to do. I don't need to be, if I sand aggressively, I'll sand right through the primer, which I don't want to do. So that surface now, oh wow, that feels just fantastic. I'm going to also do, because when you're sitting looking at the machine, this front edge is kind of critical, so I'm going to give that a light sand too. I'm being very careful not to sand at the edges because you easily sand right through at the edges. So a few strokes, and that takes care of that. The other places that you see are, when you're looking at the machine, sitting in the operator position, you see this top edge. So I'm going to rinse off my wet paper here. And I'm going to use, I've got a very flexible foam backer here for the wet paper. And I'm going to just wrap this on here. And I'm just going to take a few strokes up in this vicinity, just to make that nice and smooth. All right. Again, these are the places that your eye falls when you're first seeing the machine. And a little bit right in here too. There's a decal going to go on there, so we want that to be nice and smooth. So you can see if you look here, I've now got green from the primer on the sandpaper. I'll just wipe this off. And that is all I need to do on this machine. The rest of it, I'm not going to bother wet sanding. It's quite smooth. If you run your fingers over it, you can feel any, that's a tiny bit coarse on the back here. So let's just give that a couple of strokes and that'll take care of that. All right, so I'm going to declare this one is ready to be, we'll let that dry and that'll be ready to be wiped off. I'm going to repeat that process with these other 3 machines here before I show you the next step. So stay tuned. Okay, so these, we've done the wet sanding, and I've taken a paper towel and wiped off all of the water on the surface and just let it air dry the rest of the way. So I'm just going to give these one final check. The real test is your fingertips. Your fingertips will pick up problems. I was looking these over very closely when I wiped them down. On one of them, on this particular one, there's a spot up here on the belt guard. In fact, I'm going to bring this over so you can see it, where I could feel a rough spot. And I went back and wet sanded that a little further. It feels pretty good now. I may need to treat that with a little bit of lacquer putty between coats of black. So before we put the final coat of black on there, if that's still telegraphing through, and it might, I'll deal with that a little bit later. But that's the beauty of this process. As you're proceeding, keep checking. It's easier to deal with problems early in the process than later. You don't want to have to backtrack. And again, the places that are going to catch your eye, this smooth curve at the top of the machine, especially the surface of the bed in this front, we want those to be nice and smooth. And where decals go, like here, and where the Singer Manufacturing Company decals goes on the back, I want that to be nice and smooth. I never worry about in here. The motor covers that, so even if it doesn't end up with a perfectly smooth finish there, there's no harm. The rest of this will be fine, especially down in here. I never worry about down in here. But the trick at this point is to make sure you get all the water out. You know, when you're wet sanding, the water runs down the front and get into these corners. And if you don't dry it out when you're spraying, the aerosol from the spray will force that water out and it'll come out into your paint. And that's a disaster when that happens. So really what you're going to see me do next is wipe these down with a tack rag to get them ready to paint. I'll be just setting them in final position, and then we'll talk about the painting, and then you'll see me spray on these first 2 coats. So hang tight. All right, so I'm getting ready to wipe these down with tack rags. If you're not familiar with tack rags, here's how they come. They come in a sealed plastic bag, and they're folded up. It's almost like cheesecloth. It's a very coarse fabric, and it's sticky. So dust and things stick to it. It tacks to it. So they're great for doing your final wipe down. I use them over and over again. After I open one and I pull it all apart, and then I kind of wrinkle it back up so it's kind of in a wad. When I'm done using it, I put it in a jar and screw the lid on, because what you don't want is for it to dry out. Once they dry out, they don't work anymore. The ones I haven't opened yet, I even store in a Ziploc bag. I just want to make sure they don't dry out. Now, I'm going to use an old one. This is an old tack rag that I've used many times before, and this is the way I like to use it. I've opened it up and then made a wad out of it, so it's kind of spongy. And then I've put a few drops of just isopropyl alcohol on there to get any of the things, any oils or contaminants out of the finish. And I'm just wiping this over the surface, trying to get everywhere so that this will take the last of the wet sanding residue and any dust that's in the finish or that's landed on it since I sanded, and basically just smooth it out and get the last of the bits of the residue off of there. So we wipe everything carefully. The alcohol dries very quickly. And my last step is I make a quick wipe over the top surfaces. One last wipe over the top surfaces. And when I move these, you'll see this when I'm painting. I reach inside and pick it up with my finger so I can turn them. That way I'm not touching any painted surfaces. This is kind of a balance point on there, so it's easy to pick up. The featherweights are light, particularly at this point. This is probably only, I don't know, 3 or 4 pounds. It's not very much. Not like the old cast iron singers. You don't pick those up with a single finger. So this is all wiped down. This is ready for finish. So I'm gonna do the same process now with the other 3, and then I'll set up the spray. So I'll come back at that point. All right, so we're very close to the point of being able to put the first coat of paint on, but there's another step I got to do, which is put some of these plugs back in. So I don't want paint going into the bushing here. I've already got these plugs in on this one, but not in the back. So we'll plug those. And I'll put a red one in that. And that looks pretty good. I don't need to plug anything else. Again, I don't bother plugging these holes in the bed. There are small ones I could put in there, but they create a shadow. So when I'm painting, you don't get as good a finish. So I'd rather chase the threads out afterwards on that. So this one's ready to go. I'm going to plug the others. This is the product I'm going to use. It's a gloss acrylic enamel made for automotive use, and I'm just going to leave this upside down. Let the chemical and everything else in there invert while I'm doing the masking here. Then I'll shake it vigorously for a couple of minutes and spray. So when I come back, I'm not going to be able to speak to you because we're going to have my breathing mask on. I'm going to open the window behind me for a fresh air supply, and you'll see me spray on this first sticky coat, and then we'll pause. I'll come back on camera and explain a little bit more, and then I'll put another coat on, and that'll be the end of this part too. Okay, so that's our initial sticky coat. You can see as I was going around, just applying very, very lightly, just to get an initial bit of black on there. I'm going to let that sit for about 5 to 10 minutes. The can says spray a couple coats a few minutes apart. I like to wait about 10 to 15 before I put the next coat. The next coat I will apply a little bit heavier. Now, one of the things about these aerosol cans that's different than when you're spraying with professional equipment is this makes kind of a round spray pattern. It's a circular spray pattern, which is not ideal. When you're using a regular spray gun, like when I paint cars and apply finishes with a professional spray gun, you get a fan pattern. It's an elongated fan, and you have much more control about how much product you're putting on. So one of the downsides of these aerosol products is the spray pattern is not ideal. So you have to be kind of careful because it's easy to create runs and sags with too much product. So I'm using short bursts, and I'm trying to stay far enough away. If you're too far back, you get kind of it's not as smooth a finish. It gets kind of a prickly surface because the aerosol evaporates quite quickly. So there's some trade-offs. It takes a little bit of practice to be able to apply aerosol paint effectively. So I'm going to wait a couple of minutes, and then I will come back on camera and put on the final coat. On that one, you're going to see me be a little more careful. I'm not, rather than running around to the back and kind of shooting from a distance, I'm going to be picking the machine up so that it's always facing me, so I can do a little bit better job that way. Again, the first coat is just to get some black on there, let it start to sit up. So I got a good base for this medium second coat.